They were not supposed to exist. No blueprint from a famous admiral. No proud unveiling ceremony. No belief that they would survive even their first mission. And yet, when Japanese patrols began disappearing in the darkness of the Pacific, whispers started spreading across enemy radios. The devil boats are coming. Small, fast, almost invisible at night, and armed with a weapon stolen from the nose of a fighter plane. This is the forgotten World War II story of how desperate American engineers ripped a P-39 Airacobra cannon out of the sky and bolted it onto a boat so small it looked like a toy, a boat that had no armor, no radar, no mercy. And somehow, it terrified the Japanese Navy, a war they were losing at sea. The Pacific, 1942. By mid-1942, the Pacific Ocean had turned into a nightmare for the Allies. Japanese forces controlled island after island, using narrow jungle channels and shallow coastal waters where large American warships simply couldn't operate. Destroyers were too big, cruisers too slow, battleships too valuable. And submarines? Submarines hunted big targets, carriers, troop transports, not small barges, sneaking supplies through mangrove-choked waterways at night. But that's exactly how Japan was winning. Under cover of darkness, small Japanese boats delivered troops, ammunition, and food to isolated island garrisons. They moved silently, hugging the coastline, impossible to detect before vanishing again. American commanders were furious. They had air power. They had steel. They had firepower. But they couldn't stop boats the size of fishing skiffs. A desperate idea from the bottom of the chain. The solution didn't come from Washington. It came from frustrated officers, mechanics, and engineers who were tired of watching enemy boats slip away untouched. What if, instead of building a big ship, they built something smaller? Something that could chase the enemy into shallow water. Something fast enough to hit and disappear. Something armed so heavily it made no sense at all. That was when someone looked at a broken P-39 Airacobra sitting useless on an airfield. The P-39 was a strange aircraft. Unlike most fighters, its engine sat behind the pilot, and in its nose was mounted a terrifying weapon, a 37mm M4 cannon. This gun was designed to destroy aircraft and light-armored vehicles and with a single hit. Someone asked a question that would change naval warfare forever. What if we put that gun on a boat? The boat that shouldn't carry a cannon. The craft they chose was laughably small. A PT-style motor torpedo boat, barely longer than a city bus, built of wood. Thin planking, no armor at all. Mounting a 37mm aircraft cannon on it made absolutely no sense. The recoil alone could tear the boat apart. One direct hit from enemy fire would turn it into splinters. But desperation kills fear. Engineers reinforced the bow. Mechanics welded custom mounts. Aviation guns, never meant to face salt water, were sealed, modified and bolted down. The result looked insane. A tiny wooden boat, with the nose gun of a fighter plane staring straight ahead like a predator's eye. First trials. This will either work or explode. The first test firing was held far from cameras. No generals attended. No photographers. Just men standing back, half expecting the boat to rip itself apart. The engine roared. The boat accelerated. And then, boom, the 37mm cannon fired. The boat didn't explode. It didn't flip. It didn't sink. Instead, the shells screamed across the water and obliterated the target hulk in a single hit. Silence followed. Then laughter. Then disbelief. One sailor reportedly said, "If this thing hits anything smaller than a destroyer, it's gone." Night becomes their weapon. The boats were never meant to fight during the day. They were hunters of the dark. No lights. Engines throttled low. Crews trained to navigate by shoreline shadows and moonlight reflections. They struck Japanese supply routes where the enemy felt safest. Narrow channels, shallow lagoons, jungle-covered coasts. And when they attacked, there was no warning. A sudden engine burst, a flash of fire, and a 37mm shell ripping through a wooden enemy boat like paper. Japanese crews didn't even know what hit them. The enemy gives them a name. Japanese radio traffic began reporting strange encounters. Small boats, too fast to catch, too heavily armed to ignore. Survivors spoke of shells punching through hulls in one shot. Boats exploding instantly. Crews vanishing without a trace. Soon a name appeared in intercepted communications. Akuma no Fune. Devil boats. The name stuck. Why they were so terrifying. The fear wasn't just the gun. It was the unfairness of it. These boats were smaller than Japanese patrol craft, faster than anything escorting supply runs, hit harder than vessels 10 times their size. They appeared where no enemy should be able to operate. And worst of all, they never stayed. One strike,
One kill.
gone back into darkness. A new kind of naval warfare is born. By late 1942, more boats were being modified. Some added twin 50 caliber machine guns, extra fuel tanks for extended range, improved night navigation techniques. But the heart of the Devil boat remained the same. A fighter plane's weapon, fighting a naval war. And the Japanese Navy was forced to reroute supplies, add escorts, and slow down operations, all because of boats that weren't supposed to matter. The night the Devil boats drew first blood. Solomon Islands, late 1942. The moon was a thin blade in the sky. Perfect hunting weather. The Devil boat slid across the water with its engines barely whispering. The crew didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every man on board knew the plan by heart. Ahead of them, somewhere beyond the dark line of jungle, Japanese supply barges were moving. Slow, confident, protected only by the belief that no American warship could reach them here. They were wrong. A mission no one expected them to survive. This wasn't an official operation. No fleet support. No air cover. No rescue plan. If the Devil boat didn't return by dawn, headquarters would simply assume it was lost at sea. The skipper, a young lieutenant barely in his mid-20s, scanned the water ahead. He had flown aircraft before the war. He knew exactly what kind of weapon sat bolted to his bow. A fighter cannon on a wooden boat. One good hit from the enemy would turn them into debris. But fear was useless now. Contact. A shadow moved near the shoreline. Then another. 3 boats. Japanese supply barges, heavy with fuel drums and crates of ammunition. They were moving in a loose line, engines low, crews relaxed. The lieutenant raised his hand. The Devil boat's engines surged. The sudden roar shattered the silence. Before the Japanese could react, the gunner slammed the trigger. The P-39 cannon speaks at sea. Boom! The 37mm shell hit the lead barge dead center. There was no prolonged fight. No exchange of fire. The shell punched straight through the wooden hull, and the fuel drums ignited instantly. The barge vanished in a fireball that lit the jungle like daylight. The second Japanese boat tried to turn. It never finished the maneuver. Another shell. Another explosion. The third boat opened fire wildly, tracers ripping through the night. Rounds cracked past the Devil boat. Splinters flew. The gunner adjusted, fired once more. Direct hit. 3 boats destroyed in under 30 seconds. We just changed the rules. As the Devil boat disappeared back into darkness, no one spoke. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They just stared at the empty water behind them. They had just done something no one believed possible. A tiny patrol boat had annihilated a supply convoy, using an aircraft weapon without taking a single hit. When they returned to base at dawn, commanders demanded answers. How many enemy boats? How long was the engagement? What kind of support did you have? The lieutenant's reply was simple. 1 boat, 1 gun. 1 minute. Japanese panic spreads. Within weeks, Japanese radio traffic changed tone. Reports spoke of small, fast American boats appearing without warning. Explosions too powerful for normal patrol craft. Crews killed instantly. Boats destroyed in 1 shot. Some Japanese officers believed they were facing a new class of destroyer. Others thought the Americans had found a way to mount tank guns on boats. No one guessed the truth. The idea that a fighter plane cannon was hunting them at sea seemed absurd. The problem with success. Victory brought attention. Too much attention. Senior officers began inspecting the Devil boats, and they didn't like what they saw. No armor. Exposed ammunition. Fuel tanks inches from the gun mount. One admiral reportedly muttered, "This thing is a floating coffin." The recoil cracked hull planks. Salt water corroded the aircraft cannon. Reloading during combat was slow and dangerous. Every mission was a gamble, the mission that almost ended the program. One night patrol went wrong. The Devil boat fired first and missed. Japanese return fire hit the bow. The cannon mount twisted violently. For a moment, the crew thought the gun had torn itself free. Water poured in. The engine sputtered. The boat barely escaped, limping home with smoke rising and the cannon hanging uselessly at an angle. Engineers worked through the night to save it. If the boat had been lost, the entire experiment might have ended right there. But the Devil boats were already legends. Despite the risks, crews volunteered. They wanted these boats. They wanted the gun, because they had seen what it could do. Enemy supply lines slowed. Japanese commanders rerouted barges. Escort boats were added, stretching already thin resources. For the cost of a few wooden boats and salvaged aircraft cannons, the Americans had forced the enemy to change strategy. Hunted by the dark, the enemy learns. By early 1943, the Japanese Navy stopped laughing. Supply barges no longer traveled alone. Machine gun nests appeared along shorelines. Searchlights scanned narrow channels every night. The devil boats had forced the enemy to adapt. An adaptation in war is dangerous. A trap in the channel. The intelligence report was simple. Heavy barge traffic, minimal escort. It was wrong. As the devil boat entered the channel, the water felt empty. Too empty. The skipper's instincts screamed danger, but turning back meant admitting fear. He pushed forward. Then the shoreline exploded with light. Searchlights snapped on. Machine guns opened fire from both banks. The devil boat was trapped. Wood versus steel. Rounds tore through the hull. Water surged in. Fuel sprayed across the deck. The gunner tried to fire the 37mm. The mount jammed. For the first time, the devil boat was helpless. The skipper made a split-second decision. He ordered full throttle, straight toward the enemy fire. It was insanity. Point-blank hell. At less than 50 yards, the gun finally freed. Boom! The shell ripped through a Japanese gun position, blasting sandbags and bodies into the air. The shock silenced one side of the channel. The crew swung the bow. Another shot, another enemy position vanished. Smoke, fire, screaming metal. The devil boat tore through the trap, burning, leaking, but alive, barely making it home. They reached base with the engine coughing and half the deck flooded. The cannon barrel glowed dull red. One crewman was wounded. 2 were burned. The boat had taken over 20 hits, and yet it had survived. Commanders stared in disbelief. No wooden boat should have lived through that. The psychological weapon. After that night, Japanese reports changed again. They no longer described devil boats as small. They called them invulnerable. Rumors spread that they were armored, that they carried explosives that detonated on death, that sinking one would bring American airstrikes. None of it was true, but fear doesn't care about truth. Why they kept using them. From a strategic standpoint, the devil boats were flawed. High maintenance, short lifespan, extremely risky crews, but they achieved something priceless. They made the enemy hesitate. Every shadow on the water became a threat. Every engine sound triggered panic, and in war, hesitation kills. The question no one wanted to ask. Could they scale it up? Could they build more? Improve armor? Add stabilizers? Mount even bigger guns? Some officers said yes. Others said no. Because every improvement made the boat heavier, slower, easier to hit. The devil boat's power came from its madness, and madness doesn't scale. The beginning of the end. By mid-1943, better solutions appeared. Improved PT boats, radar-equipped patrol craft, air superiority tightening around island chains. The devil boats were slowly phased out, not because they failed, but because the war no longer needed them. Why the devil boats disappeared. A weapon too strange for the files. By late 1943, the Pacific War had changed. American air power dominated the skies. Radar covered the seas. Island bases fell one by one. The devil boats were no longer essential, not because they had failed, but because the war had moved past them. And when war moves on, strange weapons are quietly erased. No parade, no medals, no headlines. There was no official ceremony. No commendation pinned to the crew's chests. No photographs published in newspapers. No press releases praising innovation. Orders simply arrived. Return modified equipment. Standardized vessels. The fighter cannons were removed. The mounts were cut away. The boats returned to being ordinary. Within weeks, the devil boats vanished from the front line. The crews went home. Changed. The men who served on them were never the same. Some transferred to standard PT boats. Some moved to air units. Some never went back to sea at all. They had lived with death inches away. Fuel tanks, ammunition, and a cannon that could tear the boat apart. One veteran later said, "We weren't brave. We were just too busy to be scared." Why history forgot them? The devil boats didn't fit the narrative. They weren't. A famous battleship, a legendary fighter ace, a war-winning superweapon. They were an improvised solution, born from desperation. Historians like clean stories. The devil boats were messy, so they disappeared into footnotes, if they were mentioned at all. But their DNA lived on. Their influence didn't die. Modern fast attack craft, riverine patrol boats, and special forces vessels all follow the same philosophy. Small, fast, overarmed, hit first, leave fast. That idea was proven at night, in shallow waters, by wooden boats with aircraft cannons. What the Japanese really feared, it wasn't the 37mm gun. It was the realization that the enemy would break every rule to win. That Americans would rip weapons from aircraft, mount them on boats, send them into darkness with no guarantee of survival. The devil boats represented unpredictability, and unpredictability is terrifying. They were never meant to exist. A fighter's nose on a wooden boat, a cannon designed for the sky, firing across the sea. For a brief moment in World War II, logic failed, and imagination won. In the darkness of the Pacific, the enemy learned a lesson. Never underestimate a desperate idea, because sometimes the smallest boats carry the biggest nightmares.